The 1997 film Eve's Bayou is a great example of what it can look like when supernatural abilities flows through a family's bloodline. And even though this film is a drama, you can't ignore the way the supernatural elements in it impact the plot. So to give a brief rundown of the film, Eve's Bayou follows the affluent Batiste family, who are of African American and Creole descent, as they live in 1960s Louisiana in the town of Eve's Bayou. Now, the town that the Batiste family lived in was named after their distant ancestor, Eve Batiste. And Eve Batiste was enslaved at one point, but in that time, she had gained a reputation for being a very powerful medicine woman. So at one point in Louisiana, there was a cholera outbreak, and the owner of the plantation that she was enslaved on caught cholera. And as a result of her abilities as a powerful medicine woman, she was able to nurse him back to health. And because she nursed him back to health, he gave her her freedom and some land. And this land is what would later become Eve's Bayou, the city that the family lives in. In addition to this, she did also have 16 of his kids, and those descendants are the ones who live in the city. And today I'm going to be focused on one of those descendants, and that descendant is Mozelle Batiste. And before I get into it, it's Black Witch Month, which means every day that I can this month, I'm going to be talking about a Black witch in TV or movie, and today I'm going to be talking about Mozelle Batiste from Eve's Bayou. So I'll start off by saying that Mozelle is not a witch, but she does have the very strong gift of psychometry, which allows her to touch people or items and pick up on their signature, which allows her to see into the future, past, or present, and this manifests itself in a lot of different ways. Since she does have such a strong gift of sight, she uses this to help the people in her community solve their problems or give warnings in order to help them prevent tragedy. On top of this, she also does dabble in voodoo from time to time. It's not her tool of choice, but she will use it depending on her mood. Now, the thing that Mozelle dislikes the most about herself, despite having this incredible power within her, is the fact that she's also a Black Widow. And she's not a Black Widow like Zoe Benson from American Horror Story. Not similar at all. Mozelle is a Black Widow in the sense that every time she gets married, all of the men she marries dies. And so when we meet her at the beginning of the movie, Mozelle has 2 dead husbands. 10 minutes later, she has 3 dead husbands. But before I continue, I thought it important to mention that Mozelle is not the only gifted person in her family. In fact, she shares a very similar ability with her niece Eve. I also wanted to point out that her brother Louis should not be overlooked. And there's a point in the movie where Mozelle and Roz are walking down a bridge or a bayou somewhere, and Roz is telling Mozelle what it was like when she first met Louis. And she said that the first time she saw him, he was setting a boy's broken arm or leg, and that when she looked at him, she knew he was a healer. And I thought that was interesting because I think a lot of times people forget that sometimes abilities don't always manifest in the extrasensory. Sometimes you can just be extremely talented in one thing or another. In his case, he was a talented healer, he was a doctor, so it all made sense there. There's also several times during the movie where Mozelle says her and her brother are 2 of a kind. They're just alike. And her brother is cheating on his wife, Roz, and the daughter, Eve, finds out, and she's kind of guiltily keeping it a secret from her mom, who eventually does find out as well. But I thought it interesting that at the end of the movie, Mozelle loses all of the men in her life, which is characteristic of a Black widow. But the way she loses her brother is very similar to the way she lost her first husband, except in reverse, kind of. So when Mozelle loses her first husband, it's because she's having an affair on him, and the guy she's having the affair with wants to whisk her away. And so he comes to the house and threatens to shoot her husband after she rejects him, and eventually does. Whereas her brother, he gets killed because he's having an affair with somebody's wife. And he says, if you talk to my wife one more time, I'll kill you. And of course, he was being cheeky, and he did. And he meant what he said, so he found out. Now back to Mozelle. So Mozelle's visions present in a number of ways. At times, they're very accurate down to the location and the day. Other times, they're more abstract. And then at other times, they appear like double entendres. And one of the best examples that I have of the double entendre is when she saw the child get hit by a bus or a train, and she assumed that it was either her nieces or her nephew. So she ran home to tell their mom. Their mom locked them up in the house all summer, and then later on it ended up being somebody else's child. It happened in the exact same way that she saw, but just not applied the way she thought it would. And then when her vision did apply the way she thought it would, she wasn't present for it. So just very bizarre. Now, Mozelle is so good with her abilities that she's able to make a living off of them. People will come from all over to consult with her and seek her counsel about things that they have going on in their life. And this might mean finding a lost son, or finding a wife, or figuring out where an inheritance or money went. These are all things that she can help with. And if additional aid is needed, this might be where she dabbles in voodoo. Now, before I move forward, across town there is another woman named Elzora, and Elzora practices voodoo. Elzora is known as a witch. She's kind of got this weird reputation around town. A lot of people don't really hang out around her, but much like Mozelle, they do seek her counsel for the price of $1 or however much she charges depending on the service. And at one point in the movie, Mozelle and Roz are walking towards the marketplace, and Roz sees Elzora's table, and she says she wants to get a reading. It's here that you can kind of see the disconnect between Mozelle and Elzora. Like, they have this kind of tension between them that's just very noticeable. Mozelle calls her a few names, and then later on she sits with her to get a reading, and this is where Elzora tells her that she doesn't need to read cat bones to tell that Mozelle is cursed. She's a black widow, and this is where she hears that every time she gets married, that husband's out of there. He's a dead man. And so obviously this infuriates Mozelle, who's just lost a husband, and so she runs out, obviously very upset about the whole ordeal. But anyways, please let me know if you guys have seen Eve's Bayou down in the comments. It's one of my favorite movies. I could probably spend about a day talking about each one of the characters. I love this film. And anyways, I hope to see you guys in my next video.